This is a talk for Adler Graduate School course number 537 on neurosis and private logic. Neurosis is a term that has been around since a Scottish doctor coined it in 1769. In psychoanalysis, a neurosis is one or more behavioral or psychosomatic symptoms related to repressed impulses, feelings, and/or traumatic memories. The term is not used in DSM-5. I'm going to suggest today that neurosis has a very specific definition in individual psychology, and that it is distinct from the way it is used in other psychological theories. In 1936, Franz Plua told us that no style of living prepares us for every event that come our way in life. He also noted that feelings of inferiority and compensatory strivings are universal. In individual psychology, this is our conception of humanity. He proposed a legal analogy in the identification of neurosis. A person is to be considered healthy until proven neurotic. He expands on the exogenous factor, which we talked about in week 5. In her great article in the 2019 Adlerian Society of UK and Institute for Individual Psychology yearbook, Annabella Shaked reviews the history of the term neurosis and proposes an IP definition. Quote, neurosis is a self-guarding mechanism against feelings of inferiority, end quote, which, as we know, are universal. She goes on to identify two characteristics of this self-guarding mechanism that define it as neurotic. First, the self-guarding movements of the neurotic avoid coping with the tasks of life, what Adler called advancing backwards. Second, symptoms are created to justify the lack of cooperation and contribution. Quote, by creating a symptom, the individual maintains the appearance of good intentions without acting upon the demands of social interest and common sense. End quote. Abramson reviewed the IP literature on neurosis and proposed 5 preconditions that are required for an individual psychology neurosis to emerge. The first 2 are increased inferiority and an unattainable goal of superiority. Obviously, these are related to one another, but I appreciate his inclusion of an unattainable fictional final goal for the neurotic. His third precondition, underdeveloped social interest, can also be thought of as poor preparation for the tasks of life. His fourth is the exogenous situation we have discussed. Finally, he adds an unwillingness to invest the effort needed to resolve the challenging situation, what Dreikers would call discouragement. I think these are important areas to assess as you strive to understand a person's style of life in this world. Here is my summary of the definition of neurosis in individual psychology. Neurosis in individual psychology evolves from one or more overburdening experiences, inadequately prepared for by a unique mix of constitutional weaknesses, discouraging experiences, primarily pampering, abuse, and neglect, and a creative interpretation of those experiences. It is characterized by a yes-but logic that is used to overcome feelings of inferiority by creating feelings of superiority rather than to generate constructive actions. I think of these as a continuum rather than an either-or set of categories. Everyone faces a variety of difficult situations that vary in burden. Each of us has an intersection of pampering, privilege, oppression, and neglect. The art of understanding a person is to grasp their history and their interpretation of it. Here is one of the most succinct definitions from Adler. Categorizing a person as neurotic or non-neurotic doesn't really tell us very much. But the process leading up to making of that distinction means that you have examined several factors that are critical to understanding a person through the individual psychology lens. We can provide treatment for non-neurotic people. A person can have psychic distress without being neurotic. As we strive to see the world as best we can as the client sees it, we begin making guesses about what they believe, forming hypotheses. Several terms have emerged out of individual psychology practice. All the terms on the left are on a continuum with the terms on the right at the other end of the continuum. My experience with clients has been that they find the term private logic most useful. Most folks have responded well when I use it to discuss what is getting in their way. I use the phrase as if quite often when I am reflecting beliefs. For example, I might say, "You seem to act as if you believe that you have to be perfect in order to be liked." When we move from the intrapsychic level to the interpersonal, we recognize that private logic leads to a repetitive and patterned style of interacting that is also non-cooperative. Individual psychology is a social psychology. I have proposed the term misalliance movements for this type of interaction. Engaging with people in a disrespectful manner, on a vertical plane instead of a horizontal one, is rooted in inferiority feelings and an unattainable goal of superiority. The best way I know to create hypotheses about what a person is believing is to consider the behavior and reports of the client, and then to ask myself, what would I have to believe in order to do this or to think this? Most of my clients have been very responsive to the idea of private logic and have been able to work with me to identify these beliefs. One of my teachers, Rich Kopp, talked about a process of reflecting beliefs instead of reflecting feelings to work with the client in defining these core beliefs. For example, somewhere through the interview, I might say, "It seems like you believe that you are unlovable," or "It seems like you believe others are hurtful." Reflecting beliefs in this way often opens up a discussion about core beliefs. In the individual psychology tradition, these hypotheses are presented to the client in the first person, as if in their voice. For example, "I'm not good enough to be liked." This expresses the inferiority feeling and the possibly unattainable goal. Or I can say, "I am only significant when I am liked by others," which expresses the unattainable goal as well as the limited source of feelings of significance. Sometimes it is useful to reflect a style or a belief that seems to be at the core of a person's mistaken line of movement. Often, these generalizations are true and useful some of the time, but become dysfunctional and maladaptive in some circumstances. Bernard Schulman describes 3 different aspects of the self-concept. He also places the image of the social world as one aspect of the world image, but I find it makes more sense to report it as a separate category. As I formulate these basic convictions, I am looking for congruent beliefs about self and about others. For example, if there is a belief about self of, I am unlovable, I will look for data to support a congruent belief about others. Perhaps others are judgmental, or others are rejecting. There may also be a corresponding belief about the world, such as, the world is dangerous, or the world is unpredictable. Bob Powers and Jane Griffith include gender guiding lines in their version of the lifestyle summary, and I find it very useful in some cases. For some people, there is a strong distinction in the expectations they have for men and for women. Carl Rogers used the term phenomenal field to describe a person's full range of experience. Parts of the phenomenal field are in awareness, while other parts are not in awareness. In our reporting of the basic convictions that we think are the foundation of the person's style of living, we must be clear to ourselves, to the client, and in our written report that these are our guesses, our hypotheses about the client, not the truth. The beliefs about self, others, and the world fit together and are mutually reinforcing. They form the apperceptive schema, the lens through which the person experiences the world. For example, I am weak, others are hurtful, and the world is dangerous. I am significant only when I am safe. Therefore, I socialize as little as possible.